10 workers walked into their company housing on the night of January 23, 2026, in the mountains of Sinaloa, Mexico. Engineers, geologists, security staff, people with families, with mortgages, with kids they were going home to see. Armed men came in, pulled them out of their rooms, and took them into the dark. 5 of those 10 men were found dead. 5 are still missing, and the mine they worked at, a project sitting on top of over 224 million ounces of silver, the world's largest undeveloped high-grade silver deposit on the planet, shut down completely. Right now, as you're watching this, that silver is just sitting there, locked underground. Unreachable, controlled not by mining engineers but by a cartel, and what happened in those mountains isn't just a tragedy, it is a direct threat to the global silver supply, and the price of silver may never look the same because of it. Stay with me, because this story goes way deeper than what you saw in the headlines. The mine is called Panuco, and the company that owns it is Vizsla Silver, a Vancouver-based Canadian mining company. Let's be really clear about what Panuco actually is, because most people who heard about this story focused on the kidnapping and missed the economic magnitude of what's been shut down. Vizsla Silver's feasibility study, released just days before the kidnapping, projected that Panuco would produce more than 20 million silver equivalent ounces every single year for the first 5 years of operation. 20 million ounces annually. That's a massive number in a global silver market that is already running a structural supply deficit. The project had a projected net present value of $1.8 billion and an internal rate of return of 111%. This wasn't a speculative little junior mining play. This was supposed to be one of the premier silver mines on Earth, and it is now sitting idle while armed men control the roads around it. And if you want to understand why this matters beyond just one company and one mine, you need to understand Mexico's position in the global silver market. Mexico is the single largest silver-producing nation on Earth. Not second, not close second. Number one by a wide margin. Mexico accounts for roughly 24% of all the silver mined globally every year. That's almost 1 in every 4 ounces of silver produced on the planet coming out of Mexican ground. The second largest producer is China, and Mexico produces nearly double what China produces, when the world's #1 silver supplier is facing a security crisis that threatens its mining operations. That's not a regional problem. That's a global commodity supply story that every serious investor needs to understand. Now, if this video is giving you a clearer picture of what's happening in the silver market, do me a favor and hit the like button right now and subscribe if you haven't already. I cover commodity and macro stories like this regularly, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Hit that subscribe button and let's keep going. So let's talk about how we actually got here, because what happened to Vizsla Silver did not come out of nowhere. The Sinaloa cartel, which has operated in northwestern Mexico for decades, was historically led by 2 dominant figures. You know, one of them, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, who is now serving a life sentence in a maximum security prison in the United States. The other was Ismael Mayo Zambada, who was essentially his co-equal partner running the organization for years. In the summer of 2024, El Mayo was captured, not by Mexican authorities, not through some military operation. He was essentially lured onto a plane in Mexico and landed in the United States in what became one of the most dramatic law enforcement moments in years. The moment El Mayo disappeared, the Sinaloa cartel collapsed into a vicious internal civil war. On one side, Los Chapitos, the faction loyal to El Chapo's sons. On the other, La Mesa, loyal to El Mayo's son, and that civil war has been burning through Sinaloa ever since, leaving thousands dead and disappeared, and creating a landscape of chaos and unpredictability that makes operating any business, let alone a mine in the mountains, extraordinarily dangerous. Here's what makes the Vizsla Silver situation even more alarming when you dig into the details. Workers at the mine told investigators and journalists afterward that the security situation on the ground had been deteriorating for months before the kidnapping. At some point in the summer of 2025, armed cartel members actually commandeered 2 of Vizsla Silver's pickup trucks and used them for purposes nobody wants to think too hard about. Company management at the site, according to former workers, responded to safety concerns by telling workers not to worry because arrangements had been worked out with the armed groups in the area. At one point, workers were reportedly instructed to swap their orange hard hats and vests for yellow ones so that the armed men controlling the territory could visually identify them as Vizsla Silver employees and not members of a rival faction. Let that sink in. The mine's on-site management was essentially color-coding their workers so a cartel could tell them apart from their enemies. That is the reality of mining in parts of Mexico today. And then on January 23rd, a rival faction apparently didn't get or didn't care about the memo. 10 men were pulled from their beds and taken. The ransom demand, according to reports, was 10 million pesos per worker. The company could not legally pay a ransom. Several of the cartels operating in that area have been formally designated as terrorist organizations by the United States government, which means paying them would potentially constitute financing terrorism. So the families waited. The Mexican government deployed over 1,000 troops to Sinaloa, including elite Marines, 3 armed helicopters, and 2 military aircraft, and in a clandestine grave near the rural village of El Verde, 5 bodies were found. 5 men who were just doing their jobs in the mountains of Sinaloa, Mexico, are dead, and 5 more remain unaccounted for as of when this video was researched. Vizsla Silver's stock collapsed. The shares lost roughly 42 to 44% of their value within weeks of the kidnapping being disclosed. A company that had been growing, that had tripled in share price over the prior year, that was sitting on top of the world's largest undeveloped high-grade silver resource, lost nearly half its market value essentially overnight, and the project, the 20 million ounce a year silver machine that was supposed to start production in the second half of 2027, is now suspended with no clear timeline for resumption. But here is the part of this story that takes it from a corporate tragedy to a global market event. Vizsla's Panuco project is not the only mine in Mexico under pressure, not even close. Analysts at TD Cowen, Benzinga, and multiple other financial research outlets have been sounding the alarm about the broader picture. The key data point that most people are completely missing is this. Mexico's top 3 silver-producing mining regions together produced over 75 million ounces of silver in 2024. That is nearly 10% of the entire global silver mine supply in a single year, coming from 3 regions that are now under varying levels of cartel pressure. 3 regions, 10% of world supply, and the cartels are fragmenting and getting more aggressive, not less. Zacatecas and Chihuahua are the 2 states that analysts are most worried about right now. Zacatecas alone is responsible for approximately 33% of Mexico's total mining output. Chihuahua accounts for a significant share as well. Together, these 2 states represent nearly half of Mexico's entire mining production, which in turn represents nearly a quarter of global silver supply. The major mines operating in these states include operations run by Fresnillo, which is one of the world's largest primary silver producers, Endeavor Silver, and First Majestic, among others. All of these companies have mines located in regions where analysts at TD Cowen have identified strong or dominant cartel presence from the Ching, the Jalisco New Generation cartel, which lost its leader El Mencho in February 2026. And when a cartel loses its leader, history shows what happens. The organization fragments, lieutenants go out looking for new revenue streams, and mining operations in remote mountain regions become extremely attractive targets for a group of armed men who need to fund a turf war. The way cartels are attacking the mining industry has also evolved, and this is something that the smartest analysts in this space are really focusing on. The old model was extortion. You want to operate in our territory, you pay us a monthly fee, everybody goes home. That model has been operating in Mexico's mining sector for years. Mining companies have generally understood it as an unfortunate cost of doing business in certain regions. Industry association CAMMEX estimated that criminal activity accounts for up to 5% of total mining costs. The sector spent over $105 million on private security in 2024 alone. But the new model, the post-fragmentation model, is much more unpredictable and much more dangerous. Fragmented cartels, meaning smaller groups that are no longer under the discipline of a unified command structure, don't have long-term business relationships to protect. They don't care about maintaining the golden goose. They just need cash. Right now, for guns, for vehicles, for bribes, and that makes them capable of things that an organized hierarchical cartel wouldn't do, like kidnapping 10 miners from their beds in the middle of the night. The road control angle is something I want to make sure you understand because it's less dramatic than kidnapping but potentially more economically significant in the long run. Mexico's mining operations are typically located deep in the mountains, connected to the outside world by a limited number of highways and transport corridors, or concentrate has to travel those roads from the mine to a port or smelter before it can be sold. Cartels understand this completely. You don't need to storm a mine to shut it down. You just need to control the road, set up checkpoints, block trucks, demand payment per ton of ore that passes through your territory, analysts have described Mexican transport corridors as currently the weakest link in the country's mining ecosystem. If you can't get your product to port, you don't have a business. You have an expensive hole in the ground, and reports indicate that extortion demands on individual suppliers in mining regions were running at approximately 200,000 pesos per month per facility as of early 2026. That is per facility. A major mining operation with dozens of subcontractors is getting hit with security costs that rival labor and electricity as line items. Now zoom out and look at the global silver supply picture. This is all happening on top of the silver market has been running a structural supply deficit for 5 consecutive years. The world is consuming more silver than it mines. That gap has been filled by drawing down above ground stockpiles, by recycling, and by processing silver, held in less accessible forms. But those inventories are not infinite. Every year the deficit continues, the buffer gets thinner, and the deficit is being driven by forces that are not going away. Industrial demand for silver, particularly for solar panels and electric vehicles, has been growing rapidly and is forecast to keep growing. As the global energy transition accelerates, a single solar panel uses silver in the conductive paste of every cell. The world needs to dramatically expand its solar capacity to hit climate targets. That means dramatically more silver, year after year after year. And Mexico, the country that was supposed to supply a huge portion of that silver, is in trouble. Global silver production is expected to decline at a compound annual rate of nearly 1% through 2030, with Mexico accounting for a significant part of that decline, and that's based on the planned closures of aging mines. And the regulatory environment before you even factor in cartel risk, add the cartel risk on top of a declining production baseline and a supply deficit that's already been running for 5 years, and you have a commodity setup that is genuinely extraordinary. Here is the final piece of this picture that I want to leave you with. The market has not fully priced this in yet. The initial reaction to the Vizsla silver kidnapping, as terrible as it was, got absorbed relatively quickly by the broader silver market. But what the market is not yet pricing is the long-term structural risk to Mexican silver supply, as cartel fragmentation makes the country's most important mining regions increasingly uninvestable at the margin. Smart money, as one analyst put it, is not yet fleeing en masse, but it is paying very close attention. And when large institutional capital starts demanding a jurisdictional risk premium on Mexican mining stocks and Mexican silver supply chains, the companies that mine silver in stable, safe jurisdictions are going to look very different on a comparative basis than they do today. The families of 5 men who went to work in the mountains of Sinaloa and didn't come home are living with the most real version of this story. Their loss is the human cost, but the ripple effects of what happened in that valley on January 23, 2026 are going to be felt in the global silver market for years. A project with 20+ million ounces of annual production capacity is on ice. The world's #1 silver-producing nation is facing a security crisis that is structurally worsening. The silver market was already in deficit. Industrial demand is structurally growing, and the institutions that set commodity prices are only now beginning to grapple with what it means that Mexico's silver belt is, to a meaningful degree, under cartel influence. That's the story. That's why this matters. And that's why you should be watching the silver market very closely right now. If this video gave you real information you couldn't find condensed anywhere else, please drop a comment below. Tell me what you think, whether you're already watching silver, whether this surprised you, whether there are angles you want me to go deeper on. Your comments genuinely shape what I cover next, and I read every single one of them. And if you know someone who follows commodities, who's into precious metals, or who just wants to understand what's really happening in the global economy beyond the mainstream headlines, share this video with them right now. It costs you nothing, and it gets this information in front of people who deserve to understand it. Hit share, pass it along, and I'll see you in the next one.